Every time I see one of these guys do this, do they not understand that every time Michael Bloomberg opens his face, that just becomes de facto fundraising time for Second Amendment advocacy? Do they not get that they are their own worst enemies?
Well, I'm not sure they do. They live in a bubble, it seems to me, and pretty hard to penetrate that bubble and bring them facts. They have their own set of facts, but they were confronted with reality in spite of their own set of facts. What happened in Bunkerville, not Bunker Hill, Bunkerville, Nevada, was an absolutely stunning rejection of the assumptions of the ruling class that they can do anything they want. And what they found out was that the Second Amendment is actually alive and well, and it performed perfectly out in Nevada to keep tyranny in check. Hoorah!
I remember in, what year? It was 2010 when Sharon Angle ran against Harry Reid, and she was eviscerated in the press because she made a remark about Second Amendment solutions to governmental malfeasance. And doggone, that's exactly what happened. In part in Nevada. They actually had somebody sitting there willing to shoot back, which most people don't want to face.
This time, instead of the way it worked out at Waco, the thugs had a distinct possibility of not going home to their wives and family.
Yep.
And I think that, and there were people on the way. I had an airplane ticket. I was ready to go out there for a news conference that had been called by the organizers, Stuart Rhodes of Oath Keepers and Richard Mack of the Constitutional Sheriffs and Police Officers Association. And I was on my way on Tuesday morning. I was in my car, and I get a call from Stuart Rhodes, and he says, well, the federales have packed up and left and returned the stolen cattle. Situation returned to normal.
One thing that strikes me about this, and I'd be interested on your opinion on this. Now, the Senate Majority Leader of the United States Senate, who has not passed a budget, who is watching Obamacare get implemented, and we have Iran on the horizon, we have North Korea on the horizon, we have the continuing war on drugs, we have the continuing immigration amnesty push and everything. Why is he so focused on Bunkerville? I mean, I know the answer to this and everything. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I think came into play when the Bureau of Land Management backed down was that would have come to light as a Harry Reid production, and I don't know how good that would have looked for him. But this is misplacement of his priorities, isn't it?
It looks to me as if the majority leader got found out, because as we started to look at that thing, it turned out that he wanted to turn a good chunk of the Nevada desert into a huge solar farm, and had his deals cut with the Chinese, communist Chinese, not Taiwanese, and didn't quite work out the way it was supposed to. And it was because of those ornery Bundy folks and their supporters who were coming in by the minute from all over the country. I've read that there was one chap or a couple people, whatever, that drove in from New Hampshire. Now, I'm impressed. I am really impressed with my fellow Americans that they would lay down their lives and move over to where help was needed. That was truly a magnificent moment. There still is great in America.
Well, they're still going, too. They're still going. Right after you, I've got James Yeager, who got there Tuesday and is still there. He's still there at the Bundy Ranch. He's going to come and give us a report. But to me, that sort of signals to politicians, I'm sure they don't interpret it this way, but don't they normally count on a short memory?
Yes, they do. And I don't think there's a short memory involved in this at all. As you're pointing to, there's some, from what I've gathered, 100 people at any one time that are standing guard at the Bundy Ranch, and they come in rotation. Guys can stay for a little while, and then they got to go back, but somebody comes in and takes their place.
Yeah.
It's magnificent.
It is.
All this just sort of happened. I'm sure a lot of it is thanks to the organizing abilities of Sheriff Mack and Stuart Rhodes of the Oath Keepers, but really, this is stupendous. I am in awe of what has happened.
I'm almost certain that the Sheriff Gillespie, he's probably not a member of Richard Mack's organization, is he?
He might be a new member because he was playing footsie with the federales until all the attention. I think this is what really turned the issue in the direction of freedom. It could have gone down just like Waco, but for one thing, God bless a Fox crew, TV crew, that probably helicoptered in because the roads were all closed. So there was a Fox News crew, TV crew, on location, and then all those pesky cell phones with their video capability, not to mention video cameras. And I've seen a lot of exhortations of people that, hey, if something's coming down, make sure you've got your video camera. Well, if there were 1,000 guys and more out there, do you suppose there were 2,000 video cameras? I mean, this was going to happen live. And I don't know what the technology was, and I've got to find out, and I've made a request. But somehow they were able to get Wi-Fi-like capability so that they could live stream, not 20 minutes later when they got over to the interstate with a cell tower. These guys were incredible. They brought brain power as well as gun power to this event, and I think that is precisely when the feds realized, oh no, this is an aw shucks moment.
That wouldn't have played well if they'd had a shootout with those civilians. We're about to come up on the first break. I want to talk to you about a little bit more about Reed, because he seems to talk. Every time he opens his mouth, he just gets a pass.
It sounds like a thug when I hear him speak. He's like a mafia don, you know.
Well, every time I hear him talking, though, I mean, he is, I'm not going to say that to you. You don't want to hear that. That's drivel. I'm not even going to say that to you. Gun Owners of America, you can find them at gunowners.org. $20 enables my guest to go out and wreak havoc, which is that's the only distraction he allows himself. Everything else he's pretty clean, but he likes that havoc. This is Lock and Load. Harry Reid has gotten out there and he's gone his labels way. First of all, it's sort of unbecoming to be the Senate Majority Leader. I know this is the Obama era, but it's sort of unbecoming. But isn't he sort of calling the governor of Nevada, Brian Sandoval, who's behind the Bundys, and in a fashion, and the other senator, Heller, he said that they were overreaching their power there. Isn't he sort of labeling them the same thing?
I don't think he gives a nevermind either. This is the way the hard left seems to think, that they don't have people that disagree with them. They have enemies that need to be obliterated. It's a la Alinsky, and it's the communist playbook for the 21st century, and that's what they're doing. You know, he is starting to lose it, I think. The kind of statements that he makes, just the way he talks, it strikes me that this guy has probably not too much longer to go before he's in a wheelchair with an attendant getting him from one place to another.
Well, I mean, this is sort of the gun grabber way, though, isn't it? It's projection. He's calling these people enemies of liberty and domestic terrorists, when in fact he's one of the bigger threats to the Constitution present today.
And to call people who support small government, which is the opposite of tyranny, to call them terrorists when there are actually Muslims in our country that want to make things go boom, and to not have any attention directed to them, it's as if they're not really connected to reality, and I guess that is part of the problem of being a liberal. You're never happy. You're always angry. You know, they're so dangerous with their anger, Bill, that I've come to the conclusion that I was wrong to think that everybody should have a right to keep and bear arms. I think we should have an exception. Yes. I think we should not let angry liberals have guns. They no wonder they want to control ours. They think that we're the same as they are. And, of course, that's not quite true. Look at what happened in Bunkerville. Hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people, men, women, and children, armed to the teeth, and not one bullet went out the muzzle.
Yeah, he's out there saying that they put women and children out front. He's
and you
missing
know
part.
what? I think the thugs would have been perfectly happy to shoot them, but somebody got sane enough to think that, bad optics, better not do that. Yeah, because it was all live time, real-time television. They had to do their tyranny, and they weren't able to take advantage of the deeds of darkness, as the Bible describes it. They were out there in the plain light of day. Darn!
Now, I know this may have been small potatoes, but you just mentioned small government, limited government. Did you see where the FBI has been doing spot checks on who to consider suspicious at gun shops?
Well, they don't like the idea that somebody, there's a gun store in Maine that said, hey, it's against the law for you to just copy all of the people, all of my records, all the people that have bought guns. You can't do that. And they're threatening to shut him down.
Yeah, I think I talked about that, Cat. It is illegal. It is illegal. They know it's illegal. They're just, could I say, fearmongers, out of control fearmongers?
Well, the president encourages that. The president looks at anybody that's not on his side as an enemy to be eliminated. And I don't think the president had any problem with the BLM agents being deployed with their M16 fully automatic battle rifles with large
weapons of
magazines.
War.
Yeah, please. Yeah. He didn't have any problem with that. He was trying to intimidate those Mormon monsters into submission, and didn't quite work out the way the Alinsky playbook had it. And that's because, by God's grace, there is still a spirit of liberty left in our country. And people said no. And they were willing to not only say no, they were willing to make sure no happened.
What I was referring to is this past week in Columbia, South Carolina, a gun store is reporting that an FBI agent that dealt with domestic terrorism did a spot check on them. And he told them, listen, if you have some Middle Eastern people coming in buying guns, don't worry about them. You need to worry about the types that are talking about small, limited government.
You know, the fact that we have an FBI agent whose brains are that addled tells me that that's an additional reason why there should not be an FBI. It's not in the Constitution. There's no authority for the federal government to have law enforcement powers outside of enforcing postal law, ports, that sort of thing, currency. I think that's about the list that's been delegated. And anything else is not constitutional, and that guy reflected an attitude that was just crying out for elimination. He needs to be working for a state police agency or for a county sheriff's department where the sheriff gets elected and will tell him, Bud, don't you talk like that or the folks here aren't going to reelect me.
He would probably, somebody like that in the sheriff's department would probably be best suited keeping the patrol cars clean, wouldn't he?
Well, that needs to be done.
Yes, it does. Very important. Patrol cars must be shiny. Joining me is the boss, executive director of Gun Owners of America, Larry Pratt. New York and Connecticut, they have the potential to be individual cul-de-sac micro Bundy ranches, don't they?
Freedom's not only alive in Nevada, it's alive in even New York and Connecticut.
Yeah.
Oh, the thought! I am so amazed that actually the resurgence of the American spirit was not first seen in Bunkerville, Nevada. As delighted as I am, and I'm still on cloud nine for what happened out there, but no, it began in Connecticut, and it now in New York, where thousands of our fellow American patriots, may I use such a scary word, said, no, I'm not registering, and in their case actually re-registering my firearms and my magazines. That's just not right. It's unconstitutional, and I'm not going to do it. And so you've got all these, the Russian word was refuseniks, people that didn't go along with the communist regime there, and they're not going on with the communist regime here either. We've got a nation full of refuseniks, and the scary thing, Bill, is that they're armed.
Well, I mean, I find it interesting that they still push for gun control after, they couldn't do it federally, so they got 3 states in on it, New York, Connecticut, and Colorado. In Colorado, 3 politicians lost their jobs. And right now, their new gun laws in federal court
And by the way,
Connecticut.
one of those job losses occurred in Pueblo, which is San Francisco in the Rockies. We're talking about a very profound pushback that has ignited a base that the Republican establishment had anesthetized politically for so long. But with these issues in the forefront, when it's an issue of freedom, of integrity, of the Second Amendment, all of a sudden, where'd all them conservatives come from?
Well, I mean, Morse was out there telling his members of the Senate, don't listen to your constituents, which would be chilling for you no matter what party you vote for. I mean, even Democrats would be like, well, why do I vote for you if you're not going to listen to me? Recall. Right now, Cuomo and Malloy have quite the quandary on their hands, don't they?
They have passed a draconian anti-gun package, and there's nobody to hand it off to. The sheriffs of New York have said, we ain't playing. We're not going to collect those guns. Some 250 police officers in Connecticut, via Facebook and email and whatever, have made it known that I'm not collecting anybody's guns. So these little tyrants in their pink tutus have stamped down their feet and said, we're not going to have any guns here. And the response coming back is, oh yeah, are you going to collect them yourself?
Well, that's all the problem, isn't it? I mean, the problem they're running into is the politicians are not the ones that strap up and go get them.
No, they don't have to worry about coming back home to their family. But what about those officers and those sheriff's deputies that are going to have to, it will happen, that eventually they're going to run into somebody who not only is a refusenik, but he might even have some sort of button thingy that he pushes, and by the time the operation is over, the cops are surrounded by the militia.
A la Lexington and Concord, yeah.
And they won't be standing there with muskets either. They're going to be standing there with AR-15s with really big magazines.
And they'll be wondering if they're registered.
No, I don't think so. Come and get them.
Come get them, comrade. What is there? How do they? I mean, with a politician, it's all about saving face, especially with a liberal politician. So, what is their out? Do they wake up one morning and put out to the press, I've had an epiphany, or do they just ignore it, or do they make believe like it's not even happening? I mean, what do they do?
So far, they seem to be taking the latter option, just acting as if there were nothing going on at all. And, okay, fine. You don't want to acknowledge that you have a problem. That's okay. But you know what? You've got us so stirred up, we're going to see you at the election.
Yeah, that's the other thing, isn't it? Given what's going on nationally, I mean, most of these, Colorado, their governor, Hickenlooper, Malloy, Cuomo, is it O'Malley in Maryland? All these guys have presidential aspirations, don't they?
Bless their heart. That's kind of funny to think that these little pipsqueaks imagine themselves in the White House. I don't think so. There were those recall elections out in Colorado, including one in Pueblo. It got so bad that when the next senator was being challenged through the recall process, and it was clear that the signatures needed were going to be obtained to get the recall election put on the ballot. That's when that senator resigned on the spot, and the governor appointed another senator so that it would thwart the recall process. And there had been two other senators that were in the sights of the recall types, and when the governor showed that, well, we can play the resign and replace game there too, that sort of stopped the recall movement, but it only stopped the process, not the sentiment. And if anything, it probably just made people even angrier that you guys don't want to play by the rules, even when you've made the rules to suit yourselves. And so I think they realize that saving something very unexpected, they're in a whole heap of trouble. And then you go down and look at the election that was held in Florida for special election to replace longtime Rhino Republican and name-only congressman, died in office. That's the only way you can get rid of some of these guys. You have to carry them out on a hearse. Anyway, the election was held to replace him, and keep in mind that Obama had carried that district both times, and a guy by the name of Jolly beats a gal with statewide name ID. She'd run for governor. She's one of these elitist oozing types, and I guess she really expected that she was going to carry that. And this real cretin one, I mean, can you imagine anybody that gets up on election night and says, well, the first thing I want to say is I want to thank my gracious God for this victory?
Oh, my.
Mixing religion and politics.
Oh, no.
Oh, my, the thought. So,
that district, a lot of people thought of that district as, I guess you'd coin it this way, San Francisco in the southeast, huh?
Well, it's certainly leaning that way. It might not have been as radical as some others, but it had a back, when you go for Obama twice, it kind of says there's some people that don't think the way we do that are living there. And the good guys weren't voting. Well, it turns out maybe the good guys got energized, and maybe they had a candidate that gave them something to vote for. And then you go up to Pennsylvania. There was a special state Senate election there to fill a vacancy in a state Senate district in the York, Pennsylvania area in southeast Pennsylvania. There, when the dust settled, the Democrat got 24%, the Republican got 26%, and a guy that had been in the Republican primary and decided, I'm going to run as an independent, a Tea Party type guy, on a write-in, he got 47% of the vote. Absolutely blew out the establishment candidates of both parties. Bill, I think the natives are restless.
I think so too. We're coming up on the last break. When we come back, I want to talk about every town for gun safety, or as I look at it, the subtext of this is the next fundraising membership drive for all gun advocacy groups in the nation. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mikey.
Thanks, Little Big Gulp. I appreciate that. You do better work than we could ever hope to. You by yourself. I just wish we could see him when he's surrounded by his armed detail, because he is sort of a little short glass of water, isn't he?
That's right. The guys that are protecting him completely overshadow him. It's kind of like a bunch of 7-foot guys walking a Chihuahua.
My guest this hour from Gun Owners of America is Larry Pratt. We get to watch a lot of miscalculations, don't we, sir?
We saw a big one earlier this week, didn't we?
Yes, we did. Bloomberg has decided to take the Moms Demand action against the illegal mayors for America and merge them and start every town for gun safety, which I guess safety is a new way to spell prohibition.
Yeah.
And he thinks that recently, Gun Rights Across America, they got their Facebook page moniker, every town for gun safety, and took it over. And they're getting out and challenging people. I mean, Glaze got out there, and I don't know if he was serious or not, but he's saying maybe we should challenge them to a duel.
We saw that, and we thought, is he really serious about that? Here's a gun grabber talking in terms of a duel. So we've challenged him to a verbal duel, and the time and place would be the May event, the American Spring, on the Mall in the District of Columbia, and we pointed out to him that he should feel very safe there because you still cannot carry a gun anywhere in the District of Columbia outside your house. So it should be okay, sweetie pie, no problem there, and we can have that little debate. And, we'll see if he takes us up on it. He's going to have something better than what they've been able to do heretofore, because everywhere their policies are implemented, crime is higher than it is where there is freedom. Gun Owners of America is in Fairfax County, right across the river from the District of Columbia. In the District of Columbia, their crime rate murder rate has actually declined some because you can now at least have a gun in your home, and it doesn't even have to be locked up in a safe. The thought. Well, their murder rate now is only 9 per 100,000 inhabitants. In Fairfax County, where we do have to go along with having the government approve our concealed carry firearms, we don't for open carry. We can just strap a hog on the hip and walk on anywhere we want, unless, of course, it's some sort of government building with its prohibition. But there in Fairfax County, the murder rate is 1 per 100,000. Now, Mr. Glaze, how do you explain that? Where all these guns, I've been in stores, I'm checking out. The cashier, of course, was close to the door, makes sense. And the door opens and a guy walks in with I think it was a 45 on his, it was a big old handgun, on his hip. And clerk looked up, saw what was happening, went back to counting out the rest of my change. Didn't even cause an alarm. I was so impressed. Here I am in ultra-urban Northern Virginia, where I want to tell you, if anything, we have more people in Fairfax County by, I think, twice than they do in the District of Columbia. We are a very urban county, and you can walk around with a gun on your hip, and people don't even really bat an eye. There is one group of people that do bat eyes, and that's the criminals. They tend to avoid Fairfax County.
We got a caller coming in, Mike in North Carolina. Yes, sir.
Mr. Larry Pratt, it's a pleasure to speak with you.
Well, thank you, sir. Good morning.
I first come in under one of your books I got back in about 2000, Safeguarding Liberty. A fantastic book.
Well, I'm glad you like it.
The chapter that I especially liked was the chapter on what the Bible has to say about gun control and gun ownership. And I'm sure you're familiar with it because you wrote the chapter.
Right. It's a book that I edited, but that one was one that I did write, and it was basically an analysis of how the Bible deals with using lethal force in self-defense, and to kind of answer the question the way Calvin Coolidge might have, it's in favor of it.
Personally, myself, I work in the ministry part-time, and I actually am enrolled in a Bible college. And that book in particular, that chapter, is something that I have used as an aid to come to the defense of gun ownership, because in many religious circles, it's a very iffy thing. The church really doesn't speak out about it. But your book really is a good aid for me. I appreciate it, especially in the time of the year that we're in right now, being the Easter holiday. And I'd like to thank you for that book personally.
Well, thank you, sir. Yeah, now that we're talking about Easter, we point out that Christ did not resist and, in fact, thwarted Peter's efforts to defend him, not because Christ was a pacifist, but because Peter didn't understand what was about to happen, that Christ had come into the world in order to die, in order to pay for our sins, which nobody else could have done because nobody else walking around was also God. And Peter didn't really quite understand that until sometime after the crucifixion, when the Holy Spirit had come zooming into the world. And so what Christ did at Calvary was not something that was an example for us to follow. And his conversation with Peter was hardly something to guide what the rest of us do. And he's even said other things during his ministry that tell us that no, Christians are not supposed to be pacifists. They're supposed to protect the gift of life that God has given us. And that's what my guns are for.
Exactly. And I agree totally with what you just said. And I'm glad I have that aid with me, because some of the faculty, some of the Bible colleges I've been to, they just they haven't explored that idea. It's not something they're used to arguing with or even thinking about. So it's nice to have a little aid. While I got you on the phone,
I'm delighted to hear that. Thank you.
Well, thank you, sir. I saw in Glee yesterday as the Every Town Demands Guns for Illegal Mayor movement, however you call it. I can't quite get it. They change their name so frequently.
That's all right. I don't try anymore.
Yeah, their Facebook page got totally hijacked.
Is there no sense of decency? Oh, my. Oh, those poor little people. They not only don't they want to have guns, they can't even keep a web page.
Well, it's amazing because now, from what I've seen this morning, the people involved in setting up those Facebook pages are urging everybody in every county and big city to also set up a Facebook page. It's totally hijacking them. You can tell their top-down movement is simply farcical. Without millions and millions of dollars keeping it in the media, it will totally vanish overnight.
I think that's a very good observation. They do not have a grassroots. And when little Mayor Mikey said that he was going to organize the grassroots, I thought, and we put out a statement to the effect that organize the grassroots. Really? You want to organize our guys? Because you don't have any grassroots. They have never been able to energize people. And I think the reason why is that they want to take our guns, and that's not quite as strong a motivation, because you might get shot when you try it, as when we are defending our guns, which we own and we have with us. And so when they say they're going to come and grab our guns, the intensity that meets them is much greater than the thug intensity of, I'm going to come and get your guns. Well, that's just not the way the dynamic is supposed to work for them, but it is. They don't have a grassroots that can be energized by taking people's guns. A rather risky sort of activity, you got to admit.
Yeah, I see it mainly as a brainwashing technique. I think they believe if they just keep pushing this agenda, especially on the social media, that maybe in 15 or 20 years they could sufficiently brainwash enough young people that they'll eventually want to surrender their rights.
Bless their hearts, we'll see.
Thank you,
Mike, thanks for the call. We're running out of time. Boss, I will be in touch. Thank you for taking the time from your Good Friday to join me today. Good stuff.
Great to be with you, Bill. Thanks.
Likewise.
We can't have a totally armed society.
In February, you introduced the Assault Weapons Ban and Law Enforcement Protection Act of 2007. It would regulate semi-automatic assault weapons, including weapons that have pistol grips, a forward grip, and something called a barrel shroud. What's a barrel shroud, and why should we regulate that?
The guns that were chosen back in those days were basically the guns that most gangs and criminals were using to kill our police officers. I'm not saying it was the best bill, but that was the best bill they could get out at that particular time. I actually don't know what a barrel shroud is. I believe it's a shoulder thing that goes up.
Big clips, 100+ bullets in each, large velocity guns.
This is a ghost gun. This right here has ability with a .30 caliber clip to disperse with 30 bullets within half a second. 30 magazine clip in half a second.
What's the efficacy of banning these magazine clips? I will tell you, these are ammunition. They're bullets. So the people who have those now, they're going to shoot them. And so if you ban them in the future, the number of these high-capacity magazines is going to decrease dramatically over time because the bullets will have been shot and there won't be any more available.
Isn't it pretty hard to define what is an assault weapon because it's so easy to write around for manufacturers to create weapons that...
Well, if it can fire a lot of bullets very quickly, that's a good place to start. There are armor-piercing bullets. Let's say 3. If you haven't hit the deer with 3 shots, you're a pretty lousy shot.
But that would ban most pistols. That would ban most...
No, but pistols are different. You have to pull the trigger each time. An assault weapon, you basically hold it, goes... Blah, blah, blah.
No, those are fully automatic weapons.
Okay. You still have to pull a trigger, but if it's 30 bullets or 20 bullets or 10 bullets before you run out, I would suggest the deer is... God wants that deer to live.
But according to gun owners, what you've just described would ban most guns that hunters use today.
If that's what they're using For God's sakes, why don't they use dynamite?
This does not prohibit, you use the word prohibit, it exempts 2,271 weapons. Isn't that enough for the people in the United States?
Mr.
Do
Chairman.
they need a bazooka?
The position that a lot of people are going to say is all you're going to accomplish is taking guns away from the good people, and the bad people are still going to
No, that's not true.
Now, that's easy to say for a man who has 24-hour police protection.
When I come in to interview you, I got to go through metal detectors. There are men with guns out there to make sure that you're safe. Okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
In the spirit of gun control, will you disarm your entire security team?
We'll get right back to you.
You'll get
Came
back
over
to me?
very friendly.
Would you like a sip of my soda?
Very friendly body language. They're grabbing on him. Grabbing on him, dragging him away.
Why can you defend yourself but not
pushing him back?
The majority of Americans. I mean, look at the team of security you got. And you're an advocate for gun control? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm counting. There are probably more.
We need to do this every day of the week and just really brainwash people into thinking about guns in a vastly different way.
It's not about keeping guns out of the hands of law-abiding Americans, and I'm sick and tired of people lying to the American people.
We're not proposing a gun registration system. We're proposing background checks for criminals.
No one's taking away all the guns.
No one will be able to be armed. We will take all weapons.
I'd love to see that. In uniform.
You've heard it here. I'm on television, so everybody knows it. I believe in the Second Amendment. I believe in people's lawful right to bear arms. I will not take your shotgun away. I will not take your rifle away. I won't take your handgun away.
Mr. and Mrs. America, turn them all in.
Look at that.